All right, deck critique time. This one comes from Verisoul, and there's a reason. Normally, I would sort of anonymize the deck. There's a reason I asked the founder, co-founder, Henry, to be able to use this deck because this is a great example of a deck that's come together super, super nice, uses the principles in the pitch deck perfection course. Yeah, I am saying that right. So I'm going to walk through all the things that Henry and his team have done really, really well, some adjustments that I would make, and go from there. And when you see a deck that's solid, the story sort of tells itself. You don't really have to do work to understand what's going on. I'm going to explain. This would be a screener deck. It's a real tight deck, which is great. And again, it's used a lot of the principles that we're looking for when we're trying to create pitch decks or advise founders, or we're making pitch decks for founders, and go from there. So let's start off with the cover, and I'm going to point out a few things and then let this unfold, because I think it's really great for you, just to anybody who's watching, and then this feedback is going to go to Henry and the team as well, to just kind of let it take the journey with me is really what I'm saying. So this is Verisoul. The future is built on trust. This is where I would change this around. So this is the marketing speak. And again, there's a difference between pitch decks that go to customers and pitch decks that go to investors. Pitch decks that go to customers tend to have a lot more marketing jargon to them. Investors, it gets completely lost. Not interested. So the future is built on trust. Okay, so what? Like, big deal. Anybody can say that. That's going to go for marketing. So I'd rather see just a very clear description, a one-liner of what Verisoul is, and we'll talk about that. The best part is in this deck, it's very clear what it is, what Verisoul is, because of the inside information. But it's great to put it on the cover, just a one-liner, because it allows people who are reading the deck to just immediately know where they are. So, I would adjust that and go from there, and just gets the investor in the ballpark, right? To explain it. Primes their mind. So the problem, Web3 communities lose billions of dollars annually to bots, bad actors, duplicate identities, and cyber attacks. Okay. So first is, I say this all the time, you don't need problem really big. If you want, you can just put problem super small up top here, like this. You want the big sentence to be this right here. Now, what I like about it is one sentence, straightforward, talks about who has the problem, how painful the problem is, and why it's a problem, right? And now, if I'm going to adjust this, let me talk about where I'm going to split the feedback here. Whenever you have a highly technical solution or your startup, most likely you will have a technical pitch deck, okay, and then a non-techie. And the reason being is, you want to, if you have a technical solution, a lot of investors are very technical, or the people scouting are very technical. There are investors that specialize in Web3, so they'll know what a cyber attack is. I actually don't know what a cyber attack is. Okay. I know what bots are. If you're listening to what Elon Musk and this is going on with Twitter, I know what bad actors are, duplicate identities, but I don't know what a cyber attack is. Right. And so that's where, from a technical perspective, if this deck is going in front of a technical investor, great. They may see that as, wow, this is a real painful problem. I get it. I've researched it. Our portfolio companies are dealing with it. But a non-technical deck, or a non-technical founder, this is completely lost. They're going to be like, okay, that doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give feedback based on a technical deck. So then I'm going to do technical, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to say, how do we adjust this to make this a non-technical deck? But so that we don't get confused, let's go through the technical deck feedback. So as far as I'm concerned, this is straightforward. That makes, a lot of sense. if I'm going to augment this a little bit and I'm just being picky and I'm throwing things, I'd love to see maybe 3 bullet points of events, hacks that happen that the technical person would know about. Or I don't know, Cybertext, is there like a famous hacker group that does these things, or the name of a virus or something like that? Again, I'm not technical enough. I fundamentally understand my way around to know this is a proper problem slide, but maybe you want to add just a little bit of context to show how bad the issue is. So if you had those 3 bullet points, the main sentence though can stand on its own, which is really key. So problem slide, I dig it. Okay. The solution. Now this is where, okay, it's again, going back to here, you can shrink this a little bit. Soul-based identity credentials for only for real people. Example, social ID verification, decision analytics. Okay. Now this is the benefit. Web3 projects grow their trusted user base and remove bad actors, bots, and duplicates. So to me, that from a technical perspective, it makes sense. Non-technical, that's just, they're going to have no idea what that is, but we're going to get to that feedback. So problem solution, check, right? Now, why now? This is in general, okay, good. Opportunity to build a global identity network. Well, I'm going to question if that really is the why now. And it might for certain technical investors, but I'd like to see maybe the proliferation of Web3 communities, things like that. Like, Web3 is the next thing, but you do cover this over here. So technology breakthroughs. Okay. So, ZK proofs, again, from a technical perspective, that makes a lot of sense because, I understand this new layer of protocol that's happening because, primary protocols or, like Ethereum, let's just say there's a need that's going on. So I fundamentally understand wallets are identity, untapped market, makes a lot of sense from there. From a technical perspective, I can see a technical person driving with it. The market size. Now this is where I'm a little lost here, even from a technical perspective. I don't know total addressable market, digital identity. How does that equate to $65 billion? What is that? Like, is that what people are spending on cybersecurity, et cetera? So I got a question mark on this market size. I'd rather hear about how much transaction is going through Web3, et cetera. So maybe something like TAM, SAM, SOM might work better for you here in terms of if everybody used your service, et cetera. This is how big the market is from a bottom up, or you can go complete. Maybe, I don't know if this is a top down number, but I'm a little lost and this could use some clarification right there. And again, I don't know enough to give you the direction. You're going to know, and most likely a technical person is going to know as well. How it works. I really like this slide. So how it works is, you're building trusted users. I love this. Community trust restored with no development required. I really like that. And I like the 1, 2, 3, 4. I could actually read this from a even a non-technical perspective. It can be dumbed down a little bit, but this slide is fantastic. How it works for me, and I'm remotely minorly technical. I dig it. Great slide. User journey. Okay, I don't know if this is completely necessary, but it made sense to me. Users are on board and then reuse their credentials across any app. I like that, right? And so initial user onboarding, reuse credentials anywhere. You could probably just have said reuse credentials anywhere, but if from a technical perspective, I think this probably moved the needle and people will understand what you're talking about. The next, traction. Great slide. This I'm super impressed with. Okay, so the traction slide, all the best traction slide, again, you're going to shrink this up. Don't need it. Since May, we built, launched MVP, landed first customer, generated 35K in revenue, and have over 20,000 unique users. That is juicy. I love it, right? I love it. And I love it so much that all, these here, you could even minimize them because you're kind of repeating that, right? And maybe this part, live with over 20,000 users, first in 2 weeks, customers chose us, premium block, like you could probably add those bullets, but, and maybe just shorten them up, but this is gold. gold right there. That if you want to do a traction statement, that is the traction. But Ed, what if we don't have any traction? Use this to make a statement to be very clear where you are, because investors are going to ask. You can't hide that. Eventually, you can avoid that all day long, but investors are going to ask. So you might as well say, we built an MVP. We have 3 users, and these users are experiencing, really great thing. And update this slide more and more, because investors are going to ask. The other thing is, go get traction. The more traction you get, and this is what puts Verisoul and Henry and team in a very positive solution, that for a pre-seed deck to say 35K in revenue, over 20,000 users, I'd like to, if you can get up to 50,000 monthly actives, that's going to really move the needle. But to get initial interest from a pre-seed, friends, family, and associates, or a really, really, open-minded investor, an angel, this is fantastic. This is a great slide. So this team slide is a little early. Okay. You probably want to put this near the end before you're asked. However, fantastic. Like check. I love the fact it's not laden with tons of advisors. We have a CEO, CTO, and a CPO. Solid. 3 co-founders. They got the domain expertise, etc. And now the only thing that I'm wondering is, are they full-time, part-time? So we're going to ask, investors are going to ask, you don't necessarily have to put it in, but investors are going to ask what everybody's doing. And, like once I give you the money, or is everybody jumping on board, etc. You're going to have that conversation, and you may want to put it in there. But right now, I think Henry is working full-time. Maybe not. But right now, this slide, the team slide, is absolutely fantastic. The team slide is designed to show we are the team to pull it off, right? And so, full stack engineer, Capital One, like, come on, that doesn't get any better than this. I'm liking this team a lot. Go to market, okay? So this is where a technical person is going to understand a little more. Productization enables no work identity solution for Web3 builders, right? But the real key is, how are you actually going to build the web? How are you going to reach the Web3 builders? So this is more in terms of the advantages and how this, use cases, etc. So I'm probably wondering, like, exactly, are you building a community, etc. Obviously, you're going to use cases, but this go-to-market strategy could be changed a little bit and beefed up in terms of, I'd love to know how you got your first $35,000 in revenue and 20,000 users. Show them that you were figuring out the secret sauce to customer acquisition. So explaining how you got those 20,000 users could be really, really pertinent, because they're going to want to know you've got some insight into this. So give them that story. That's where I would change this slide. Competition, Verisoul is different, reusable, etc. Technical person is going to understand this. So, that makes sense. Standards builder, face code, and Verisoul. So you use the magic quadrant and, all that stuff. So I dig it. Okay. Again, for non-technical person, and this, I'm going to say, flew over my head a little bit, but I like the fact that it's reusable. NFT. Actually, let me go back to this slide. If you can create a headline that, summarizes your competitive advantage here, instead of the term competition, and how Verisoul is different, how, like, it is the only reusable and productized, solution out there. You can kind of, narrow this down a little bit, put this in the headline there, and then give more room for this. Okay. So that's the feedback on there. Take it for what you will. And then continuing on, NFT customer example, Moon. Okay. This makes sense for me in the competitive advantage, etc. So go from there. Current MVP, we filter users based on criteria creators choose. So again, from a technical perspective, okay, that makes sense, roadmap. Now remember, this may be a slide that you put in like the actual deck when you're talking, you're giving the pitch, right? So business model, this is a great thing. And so if you're going to do anything, again, shrink this down and then maybe make this bigger, or we charge per transaction and we charge per, this, that, right? So I like the way that you've thought this through. And again, from a technical perspective, they're going to understand that this is a legitimate model for this space that you're doing and that you've thought it through. And funding, raising $650K pre-seed round, improve our MVP and accelerate customer growth. Okay. And I like the fact that you've got milestones and what's next is, all this stuff. It's been laid out a little bit. You're probably going to get a little bit of inquiry as to, in terms of development, et cetera, how many engineers is that, but that can come in the due diligence place later. Just remember that, savvy investor is going to ask, and then contact us, that's it. So there's a slide right there. And so the fact that you got the funding in the thing, I would probably put the team right before, and I put the business model before the competition slide. So just look at the order of the slides a little bit. But overall, I would say this deck is 90% there in terms of economy for a technical investor. Non-technical investor, let's take a look at what we're going to do. So again, the one-liner that explains what we're going to do. And so how would you draft this to explain and do the rich mom's test? And I know I've heard of the mom's test all the time, but I want to talk to the rich mom's test so that mom would want to invest in the business. So Web3 communities lose, like, how do we structure this to speak to the non-technical investor? And so Web3 is a buzz term. So, you could talk about like blockchain and crypto companies are losing billions to hackers, or something like fraudulent accounts and, et cetera. So you can basically, like, you're really going to have to replace this word. What's a bad actor, bots, all that stuff. So you could, use fraudulent, et cetera, repeat, and then, just talk about what that actually means, hacked accounts and fraudulent accounts or something like that, right? So this is interesting. How can you create some language that you explain to a complete neophyte when it comes to this? And again, I'm not saying that the investor is going to be totally dumb. They may not be a neophyte, but you never know who the gatekeeper is, et cetera. And they can always ask for a technical deck later on. They're going to know that you're technical, but how can you word this in a way that someone who's just at least savvy that Web3 exists and crypto exists and blockchain exists, how can you do that? You may not need a technical deck, as I think about it, but at the same time, nice exercise to have just in case. And then solution. So this is where this really is going to have to be pared down and, dare I say, dumbed down. And so you think like Verisoul, is a platform where users can verify their identities online using or Verisoul is a social ID verification platform for Web3, so that, projects can verify their identities and kind of, it's almost like a blue check mark on Twitter, right? That was a horrible blue check mark. Let me just pause that for posterity's sake, because now I'm like frustrated with myself. So you know how the blue check mark goes like this and goes like that, right? And then it's like blue around there. I think that's the blue check mark. Okay, I digress. Thank you for taking the moment to enjoy my scribbles here. But maybe Verisoul is a social ID verification platform that prevents duplicate account hacking and fraudulent activity, so Web3 projects can, grow and save money, something along those lines. I don't know how you do it. Again, you're going to know your business better than me, but making a non-technical version of the solution slide would be helpful for a lot of people. Why now? So this is where, again, ZK, all this stuff makes no sense, whatsoever. So, this, like, how big is Web3 growing? Put up some headlines up or something like that, NFTs, just in terms of all NFT marketplaces, how much have they transacted and grown, et cetera, how much investment is going into the marketplace. Figure out some way to talk about how big this opportunity is and how exciting your company is for being in that space. This is where I would definitely recommend Tam Sam Som. And that is, if every user or every, enterprise client used your solution, how much money could you make? What industries you're going to focus on. And so therefore, as a percentage of the TAM, that's your SAM, and your SOM is realistically, we believe that we'll obtain this and we'll be making $100 million a year. You have to remember, for an investor, like, our initial target market, is like, okay, that's great, but how much of this initial target market are you making? And you want to be in the $100+ million mark. Obviously, this is big, but that's top down. So doing a proper Tam Sam Som might be better to explain what's going on. Okay. And this is just preference. Some people don't want to do Tam Sam Som, in the beginning, but for a lot of investors, it's helpful to demonstrate that the founder has actually thought through what they're going to be doing, especially if they have a proper go-to-market strategy. So how it works for Web3 builders, again, I like the flow of it. You could probably, break this down into 1, 2, 3, like, this is how it works. Customer has to upload, whatever, and then they have to prove their attributes. Then Verisoul validates the users, or make sure that they are real. So approves the user and then grant access to trusted users. So that's the solution, right there. And then the user journey, you can break this down in simple language. Okay. For here, this is where, from a non-technical perspective, just this sentence is gold right there. We built and launched, landed first customer, generated 35K in revenue, have over 20,000 users. There's nothing technical in that whatsoever. It is just straightforward, very impressive. I fall in love with this slide more and more as I look at it, because I love founders that have traction to talk about. The team, again, this is, really great. So no complaints there. And go-to-market strategy, we're going to use, not to dumb it down, but we're going to use social, we're going to build communities on Discord, or we're going to tap this community or this network that's got 100 million users, and we're going to pay for advertising on there. I don't know what that looks like, but a straightforward, non-technical go-to-market strategy. Competition, this is where in layman's terms, you could probably, again, have this kind of big headline: we're the only reusable, productized, and all this stuff. Take all this stuff out and just put reusability, and just demonstrate that you've thought it through. You don't have to get into major technical aspects of it, because in the due diligence phase, remember, everyone, if the investor is non-technical looking at it, a lot of times they will say, hey, can I get more technical information? And they will bring in someone who is technical to vet your stuff. And that's when you have to be ready for it. So for example, if you just had this slide here like this, and you just showed it, then a non-technical investor may call in someone who's an expert on their team and say, what is CERTA? What is proof of humanity, self-ID, et cetera. And the fact that you've acknowledged those competitors is a super smart thing. Okay. So this, this makes sense, but for non-technical, I don't think you're going to need it. Current MVP, I don't think you're going to need it. For non-technical business model, I think you could just summarize. We charge per transaction, and for this, and we charge 5 to 25 cents, and then 50 cents to $1 per, et cetera, always free to the US. So you can just put kind of 2 lines there and talk about how you make money. Funding totally makes sense. Contact us. So you're not that far away, other than you're following the same patterns or same core content, but you're just adjusting it for the non-technical investor. All right. But kudos, like I said, this deck is really solid. It warms my heart when a founder goes and takes in our education and then puts a deck together that totally makes sense. I like it. I dig it. And we can go from there. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful. And yeah, congrats to Henry and the gang for their success so far with Verisoul. Looking to see what is next for you, what's going to happen. And I'm sure Henry is going to be okay if you want to reach out to him and, you know, ask his opinion on stuff. But as always, all our education is available. Pitch Deck for Perfection course, as well as we do have services where we can just do it for you, build your decks for you. Contact me, let me know. This has been your office hours. Thanks a lot. See you in the next video.